Hi, my name is Holly Mosher, and I'm here interviewing David Cobb, who was not only the 2004 presidential candidate for the Green Party and co-founder of Move to Amend, but he was also overseeing the election for Jill Stein this year and the recounts that were happening in 3 states. The interesting thing is David did his own recount in Ohio in 2004 when we saw a lot of fishy things going on. So to start, I'd love to hear what happened in 2004, especially in Ohio, and what did we learn? Okay, here we go.
Well, thank you so much, Holly. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the kind introduction. I think it's important to recognize that in 2004, I demanded, as the Green Party presidential candidate, demanded recounts in Ohio and New Mexico. We did not get an actual recount in New Mexico because it got caught up in litigation, as it did in Michigan in 2016. But this is important because I want to set the stage. In 2004, we don't know who actually won the presidential election. Just like in 2016, we do not know who actually won this election. So George Bush had a shadow on his presidency, as does President-elect Trump. So I really want to underscore that. And we learned a couple of very important things in 2004. In 2004, we helped to launch, or I would say nurture, a burgeoning election integrity movement. I don't want the Green Party or David Cobb to take credit for it because it was already beginning to happen. There were a couple of real champions saying, oh my God, these black box voting machines are terrible. This computerized voting is terrible. And where did that come from? Remember that in 2000, the problem was hanging chads, right? The antiquated mechanical voting machines. So in 2002, tens of millions of dollars of federal tax dollars were made available to states, and almost all of the states went rushing into either optical scanners or those black box voting machines, many of which don't even give a paper trail. So, and those were sweeping the country. Holly, I want to be very clear. The 2004 recount was a tremendous success because we squashed the proliferation and ongoing mass use of those black box voting machines. In fact, we helped to send not one, but 2 election administrators to jail in Cuyahoga County in Cleveland. In addition to that, we provoked a top-to-bottom review in the state of California that culminated in the abolition and outlawing of black box voting machines in California. They literally could not be used, even though many counties were using them. They were outlawed, and they were outlawed in multiple states, but not all. But the growth stopped. But here's the other thing that happened. In New Mexico, we were able, we started a litigation, but we weren't able to get a recount. But because we had the mindset of litigate, then legislate, I want to lift up the name Rick Lass, who is a New Mexico Green, who was leading the recount effort in New Mexico and coincidentally coordinating the recount efforts in Wisconsin in 2016. He led the charge of citizen activists working across Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and Greens alike over a 4-6-year period to change legislation that not only abolished the black box voting, they use only paper ballots in New Mexico. In addition to that, because it wasn't just one legislative session, they then have one very robust audit procedures. They didn't stop there. 2 years later, in the next legislative session, they instituted, get this, state funded recounts in any race that is 0.5% or closer. So the candidate doesn't have to raise the money the way we had to. It's just triggered because they say, look, in a really close election, we have to have confidence in the integrity of the results. And it's already been implemented once. So all I'm saying, Holly, is we learned a lot in 2004, and it's an important lesson. And the big overarching lesson is, if we don't fight, we cannot win.
Those are great things to come out of these recounts. And it's funny to see the mainstream media totally downplaying the importance of the recount. And it's frustrating to me. I found, it was interesting to notice how they used the recount to finally talk about the voter suppression, which we know is a problem. And it's interesting, if we had that 0.5%, both Michigan and Wisconsin would have automatically recounted, because
say that again, and it would not have cost $5 million to actually trigger them. So not only would we have actually gotten recounts, which we really didn't actually get in any of the 3 states, we tried, worked our butts off for it, but it also would have been an automatic thing so that voters could have confidence in the integrity of the reported results. We do not have verified voting in this country, Holly. That's very important. We're expected to just trust the results. And these results do not have the mechanisms in place that should engender that trust.
Yes, 100%. So we need verified, fair, accurate elections. So can you now recap what happened in the 3 states where the Stein campaign called for this, and what are the lessons we're learning?
Thank you so much, Holly. It's a great question. I do want to sort of really back up now about 2016 and tell you that, I did not hear of the kind of concerns that happened in 2004. They were different, right? They were more subtle, which means maybe they got better at cheating, maybe they didn't. But I can just tell you, in 2004, on election day, we knew that there were huge problems. And in fact, John Conyers held hearings that I and others provided testimony to. And there's a great pamphlet and booklet that you can get called "What Went Wrong in Ohio," and it's a long litany of horrible abuses that took place. In 2016, it was different. I got to confess that the Sunday of the harvest holiday weekend, I was in Austin, Texas, getting ready to go into deep rural Texas with my family for the first time, in years. And I got an emergency call from Jill early Sunday morning, literally as I was preparing with my partner. We had landed in Austin. We were getting ready to take off. And she said, I just got a call from John Bonifaz, who coincidentally was my lawyer in 2004, who Jill had run against in Secretary of State of Massachusetts, but a great election integrity and democracy activist. And he said he has a lot of concerns, and there are lawyers, statisticians, and cybersecurity experts who want to give us a presentation. Could you please make yourself available? So of course I said yes. So later that afternoon, we watched a PowerPoint delivered again by lawyers, election integrity activists, statisticians, and cybersecurity experts who gave us a presentation that made my jaw drop. And what they said was that there are huge red flags in these 3 states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. And they are this. Number 1, the polling results do not match what was expected. Okay, that happens though. But here's the second thing. The exit polling did not match, which is a huge red flag, Holly, because by the way, that's a trigger that international election observers at both the United Nations and the Carter Center use to verify international election observations.
Exactly.
So these exit polling data, this is a real huge red flag. And it didn't end there. They said, oh my God, let's turn, so that's the statisticians. And there are anomalies that are happening in a lot of these counties that are hugely problematic. And the cybersecurity experts led by a team that said, here are the particular voting technologies that are used. Privatized, proprietary corporations that have literally been given the right to count our ballots. So that alone, as a democracy activist, just sends me off the roof. Why are we corporatizing the counting of our elections? But it gets even worse. They said, our team has literally hacked every one of these systems. They are hackable. We have no evidence if they were hacked, but we can prove to you, and let us walk through this short PowerPoint to prove to you that these machines are hackable, because we've done it. And the thing that really got me, Professor Holland said at the end, I want to be clear. If I or any of my best PhD students wanted to steal an election, we could.
Yeah. It's shocking.
Holly.
It's shocking. We actually, I don't know if you've seen our other film, Free for All. We followed what happened in Ohio and Florida and we showed all the ways that they can steal votes and suppress votes as well. So in Free for All, we went to Ohio in 2006, and we're kind of uncovering all of that stuff that happened. It's from the misinformation to the privatized machines, to, that these can be hacked easily in a matter of, less than 30 seconds. Our election system is not safe. And that's exactly why I'm here interviewing you, because I care deeply about this. And I learned all about this, starting in 2006 when we started our research and did that film. And it's all concerning for me. And that's why I want to see what are the solutions. So now that we know the experts were warning of this, and what can we do, and what did you see, and tell us about how they shut down. It's so funny that Trump said, well, the elections were rigged. So why isn't he open to finding out? Why is he working? I mean, how many lawyers did they have on the ground in Michigan? I read one article that was shocking, how many lawyers they seem to have. And why are they not getting to just an audit? An audit is basic good business practices, any accounting.
And you, the viewer, if you went into a bank and you did a transaction and you had $1,000 coming to you, and they handed you an envelope already taped and handed it to you and said, you can't open this until you leave the bank, would you be comfortable with that bank? Of course not. In fact, what the bank does is count the money once, and then they count it again in front of you out loud before they ask you to sign for it. That's the basic rule, right?
Yeah.
We don't have that in this country. I want to be very clear about something. Donald Trump's claims that the election was going to be stolen should have at least put him in a posture to say, well, let's be willing to do recounts or audits, right? To ask him and his team, literally hundreds of lawyers across the country that were used to fight efforts at recounts. Let's be clear. In Michigan, we never got a recount because we were fighting the Trump campaign. And I also want to say this, Hillary Clinton did not concede. She capitulated. She should have filed for recounts herself. If she had, we would have actually gotten recounts, not only in Michigan, but at a hand count in Wisconsin, and we would have gotten a full recount in Pennsylvania. So the fact that we didn't get recounts worth a damn in any of the three states, you can rest that 100% at the feet of the Democratic Party and the neoliberals who control that party. I know that principled progressives are up in arms, as am I, about it, but be clear, the neoliberals and the corporatists who control the Democratic Party are at fault here. So in Michigan, we lost in the courts. In Wisconsin, we only got a 49% hand count. This is really important because in the 51% that we didn't get, that's where our statisticians told us we should be looking. So the fact of the matter is we can't be comfortable or confident in the Wisconsin results because the place that we really needed to look, we didn't get a hand count. And lastly, in Pennsylvania has probably the most disgraceful, outrageous rules for being able to trigger a recount. So we never even really got one there. And in Pennsylvania, it's especially problematic because the entire state votes on these black box voting machines that don't even give a paper trail. So there was no way to actually do one. So what are the solutions? I'm going to segue right into those solutions, Holly. It's actually very simple, really. Now, the details we can go deeper, but the short answer is count every vote and make every vote count, right? So this is outrageous that we have to start there, but we do because we have a system in place that does not count every vote. That's why we must have a paper ballot of record, right? That's the magic words, a paper ballot so that audits and recounts can be done. Second, we need mandatory, robust audits of all elections at every level, local, county, state, and federal. Third, we need mandatory state-funded recounts in any state, and I think the 0.5% is the right trigger for a super close election. Let's just recount, as simple as that. But it doesn't end there, because we also have to ensure that any technology is technology that is run on open source software. We should not privatize the counting of ballots. Ballots are difficult because we must, under law and ethics, maintain the secret ballot. So how you and the viewer chooses to vote, it's your business, right? So that does have to be done secretly. But the counting of those ballots must be done publicly. So we call for hand-counted paper ballots with a mandatory robust audit and a guaranteed state-funded recount in close races. We also call for the use of any technology must be open source if there's going to be any technology used at all. But that's just for the counting of votes. I also want to take the opportunity, Holly, to really underscore at the Green Party, and you can go to our website, gp.org, or the jill2016.com, and see our call to democratize elections or to build a new voting justice movement. So yes, let's count every vote, but to make every vote count, let's have full publicly funded elections. Let's get all the special interest money out. I mean corporate money, I mean union money. I don't want George Soros money. I don't want Koch brothers money. I don't want, anybody's money, right? Let's have full publicly funded elections. Holly, let's treat our elections like the infrastructure of democracy that they are. And just like we understand that we should have public roads and public water systems and public libraries and public banks, and we should have public hospitals, right? Like, let's go back. Let's stop the neoliberal trend of privatizing everything and go back to democratic public control over these things that are public. So publicly funded elections. But that doesn't end there. Let's also have ranked choice voting so that the voter doesn't have to choose against the candidate that they hate the most, but instead can vote for the candidate that they want. But get this. You're not just limited to choosing one. In ranked choice voting, you get to fully express your opinion as a voter. My first choice, my second choice, my third choice. We like to say ranked choice voting is as easy as 1, 2, 3, because you just rank order your choices. And think about it, Holly. If you go to your favorite independently owned and local ice cream parlor, not a corporate franchise, but if you go to your favorite locally owned ice cream parlor and you really, really, really like pistachio, but it's a hot summer day there in Southern California, and they say, oh, I don't have pistachio at all, do you just say, okay, I guess no ice cream for me? Or do you have a second choice or even a third choice, right? We do that in life all the time. Preferences matter. Ranked choice voting empowers the voter to fully express her or his opinion. But it doesn't end there. Let's also have proportional representation. So in seats to city council or Congress or state legislature, if a party gets 10% of the vote, they should get 10% of the seats, right? And what's really beautiful about this, Holly, is it's used in so many countries across the world. And you know what happens? It creates a culture of coalition and pluralism. Because even if I don't win, quote, win, I can say, well, I still have representation in the governing body. In the current system, it's a first past the post, winner take all election system. It's a binary system that basically forces winners and losers and artificially creates the, quote, two-party system that almost nobody likes. So proportional representation fixes that. And I'm still not through, Holly. We should abolish this racist criminal justice system, felony disenfranchisement, that is basically affecting and targeting mostly young Black and brown people, mostly men, but is very racist, that is a way of Jim Crow electoral Jim Crow. And it still doesn't end there. We should have access to the ballot for independents and alternative political parties, because after all, systemic transformational change almost always comes from alternative political parties. And it still doesn't end. We should actually have a citizen debate commission so that those candidates not only can be on the ballot, but can make their presentation directly to the voters. So the point I'm making, Holly, is absolutely, we've got to change the way that votes are counted in this country, but we can't end there. Let's make that the launch pad for voting justice in this country and say voting matters, and that we actually want to count every vote and truly make every vote count. We need to democratize elections in the United States of America.
That is really great information.
Really great information.
Oh, now I'm getting an echo. Okay, so I wanted to just recap for the audience what you've said here as the solutions. Paper, paper auditable ballots, and automatic oversight to have if it's less than 0.5% difference, open source software, proportional representation so that it's not winner take all, public financing of our elections so that the politicians are not bought and sold already by the lobbyists, ending the Jim Crow laws. And then I also wanted to ask you, about how often it's the candidate with the most money winning and how that is affecting things, and to look where we are winning the solutions, like in California, that we did get paper ballots and we did get the end of the DRE machines, which was another one, and that we are getting some public financing and that we are winning, different battles across the country. Like, there were several states that voted also to overturn Citizens United, which is one of the big problems for, corporatizing our democracy.
So I'm so glad you brought that up, because I wanted to lay out first the problem with the voting itself and the need for a voting justice movement. And you've beautifully set me up for, and it doesn't even end there. We have to recognize that we have a system that is enshrining and protecting a small ruling elite to make our decisions for us. At the end of the day, we believe that we need constitutional amendments guaranteeing the right to vote, but also a constitutional amendment to abolish in its entirety the illegitimate, court-created, totally made up, completely stupid idea that corporations and other artificial entities are persons with constitutional rights, and also to abolish the equally odious, also court-created, totally made up, and stupid idea that money is protected political speech. Because you see, Holly, as a lawyer, what really gets to me is that literally they are stealing our sacred right to self-government, and they're using the legal system to legitimize the theft. And we say, ya basta, enough already. We don't have to put up with this. Because you see, if a corporation is a person with constitutional rights, that's not just a legal technicality that only lawyers should concern themselves with. If a corporation is a person with constitutional rights, that means corporate lawyers can go into court to overturn environmental protection laws, worker safety laws, public health laws, and yes, campaign finance laws. So it really matters. And we don't have to put up with it. We can build mass movements at the local, county, state, and federal level to make changes, just like the abolitionist movement, the women's suffrage movement, the trade union movement, the civil rights movement, the LGBT movement. I submit to you this, Holly. Real systemic structural transformational change has always been driven from the bottom up. And I really want to lift up the work that you and me and lots of our colleagues did in the last election that sort of got lost. But Washington Initiative 735 in the state of Washington and in California, Proposition 59, both won with very significant supermajorities where citizens are joining the movement in those two states. We're now up to, I think, 18 states on record calling for a constitutional amendment to abolish corporate constitutional rights and get money out of elections. So overturn Citizens United and more. So again, Holly, I know you were instrumental in making that happen. So I want to lift you up. I want to lift up the organization Move to Amend and Common Cause and Yes on 59, and the Washington Initiative 735 group, WAMEND. I mean, like, ordinary people are actually coming together. And it doesn't end there. Do you know that in Portland, Oregon, they won publicly funded elections at the local level, right? I mean, there's so many victories that are happening that the things that you and I talked about just a few minutes ago, they're already happening. Right? And they're happening because ordinary people are getting involved.
Yeah, and we also saw Seattle has a public financing thing that had just passed as well. So where do you think people should start? And do you think there should be also a constitutional amendment for voting rights? Or do you think we should be working at the local level and doing that? You know, where can people plug in? Tell us where to plug in.
So you asked a good, hard question, and I don't mean to be a smartass when I tell you the answer, yes. I really mean that. Like, because for some people, they get really excited about local efforts because it's more tangible. The victory can come more quickly. So if you are the type of person who is really inspired and motivated by very concrete things with a 2 or 4 year window, and it's like, I want to do that because that's a step in the right direction, then that's where you should be. If you are a person who's like, yeah, that's good, but I really am looking at the bigger, more systemic, transformational things. I want to work on those bigger, deeper things. Then that's where you should work. The reality is that the civil rights struggle had a great phrase, Holly. I don't know if you've heard of this or your viewers have heard it. They used to always say, you get in where you fit in. Right? And so there's also, like, some people may want to do direct action. Some people want to do legislative and lobbying. Some people want to run for office. Some people want to do voter registration work. Some people just want to feed people. Some people want to sing and do music and do art and culture work. There's so much that can be done. So I would tell you this. You know, I have been mostly inspired and motivated by the changes to the Constitution because I want systemic transformational change. But I also work very closely at the state level with groups like Prop 50, Yes on Prop 59 and Washington Initiative 735 and other such efforts. I also work in local efforts. So I'm not trying to be smug or smartass when you say, should people work locally or at the state or at the federal level? I think it's the wrong question, right? The question is, where do you, the individual viewer, feel most inspired? And I promise you, with just a little bit of work, you will find other people working at the local, county, state, and federal level.
Okay, awesome. That really helps, I think, people figure out where they can fit in and where their passion lies from all of these solutions we need. And my one last question is more of a technical question. Can you talk about who in the state oversees the elections? I think most people won't even understand this path.
Oh my God, this is such a good question. And it's so outrageous when we understand that we have partisan administration of our elections, right? In almost all states, you have a member of either the Democratic or the Republican Party administering elections. This is crazy. Would you want to go to play in a sporting event when their umpire or the referee or the other, whatever official it was actually pre-selected by the opposing team? This is nuts. What we need is nonpartisan voting administration. And we should create a system where it is done publicly, transparently, and accountably by professionals who are stripped of any political incentive to put their fingers on the scale. But right now, part of the problem in Ohio in 2004 was Republican Kenneth Blackwell was in charge of the entire administration of elections. And one of the reasons that you saw it's something as simple as, like, why were there such long lines in African-American communities and college campuses, and in the very affluent white jurisdictions, people went in, voted, and left, and there were lines of literally 8, 9, 10 hours in the rain in college campuses and Black communities? It was a simple matter of how they allocated voting machines. And Kenneth Blackwell allocated machines in such a way that there was no line whatsoever in the very wealthy jurisdictions, and there were huge, ridiculous lines in Black and brown and college campuses.
That's exactly what we cover in Free for All, and we followed, what Kenneth Blackwell had done and all of that. And that takes me to the point that he was the Secretary of State. And I think most people don't realize what an important position Secretary of State was. So after Kenneth Blackwell, they brought in a new Secretary of State, Jennifer Grunner, I believe, and she did a great job, just like we had Deborah Bowen in California really clean things up. So people need to be really aware of who their Secretary of State is. And then the point that you made about partisanship, we see the exact same thing with another big problem I have, which is gerrymandering. About half of the states are redistricted well, and half are totally gerrymandered. In fact, the Wisconsin redistricting was just found to be unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, and now will need to be revisited. This is the
right-wing Supreme Court, right? So you know it's bad.
Yeah. So it's like, if we can have redistricting that is fair, and about half the states do a great job of it, and half really need to be fixed. So we need to work towards, bipartisan or multi-partisan. There's more than two parties in this country, as you know, multi-partisan, where it's not about the party system and it's about fairness, districting, fair elections. And that's what this election integrity movement is all about. And I just want to thank you so much for your time and all of your energy on all of these. And is there any last thing you want to share with the audience, or do you feel like we've covered it all?
Two things, Holly. First of all, I thank you for giving me an assignment, because I knew the great work of Pay to Play, which you were the producer of. So, I tell people about Pay to Play all the time. You've given me the assignment, for which I thank you, to watch Free for All, because actually I didn't know that. And I want to invite you to see if the Green News Network, which is a new mechanism for us to start creating our own media, I was already going to put Pay to Play on, because I know that you make that available. We were going to play that. I was going to ask for that, but I want to publicly now say, can we have Free for All too? Because I love to help distribute your great work. And the second thing is to invite you and your viewers, because I'm pretty sure that we are going to convene a voting justice conference, probably the weekend of February 26th and 27th in Philadelphia. The reason Philadelphia is because Pennsylvania probably has the worst recount laws in the country. And of course, we tried to do a recount there. So there's a lot of energy for that. And I would love for you to come. I would love for to come back on this program or other ways to try to do that. And I know that, this is a continent, not a country. So, we're going to do one on the East Coast. But I'd love to work with you and some of your colleagues to say, maybe we should do something in California too. I mean, California is like the bellwether state, right? Like, so much of what we do in California is so important. I think it'd be great to actually try to do both an East Coast Voting Justice Conference and a West Coast Voting Justice Conference, so that we talk not just about paper ballots and audits and recounts, but also proportional representation and constitutional right to vote, and abolishing Citizens United and corporate personhood and publicly funded elections. Let's put it all on the table and come together. What do you think?
That sounds fantastic, and I'm happy to give you Free for All. We actually have it online for free as well, and I did that again when I saw the primaries were being messed with. And I was actually talking to some people from the UU Church about doing, and PDA, about doing events across the country where we put together a 2-hour program with clips of the best films that show all of the problems with election integrity, and then work on state solutions. So I'd love to actually not just have the 2 conferences, but have days or, a program in every state, because each state has its own things to fix. And if we can then get super local and keep those people having monthly calls till they work towards the progress, then we could have, real, solidify people and get the grassroots together. So yes to the conventions, and then let's also, make sure we're in every state.
I have a love-hate relationship with every conversation I have with you, Holly. I love that I learn so much and I get so inspired. I hate that you always give me more work to do. But you got it, lady. Let's work together.
I hate that I always give myself more work to do. I was ready for my sabbatical.
All right. Well, yeah, take a long weekend and then let's get back to work.
Thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure. Okay. Bye, David. Mosher, and I'm here having a conversation with Jan Bendor from the Michigan Election Reform Alliance, and we are going to talk today about what's happening with Recount 2016 and also solutions for the future. So welcome, Jan.
Well, thank you, Holly.
So first off, I wanted you to tell us a little bit about how the recount has actually been shut down and what was the legality of that?
Well, there was no legality. That's the problem. The recount was going to be pretty useless anyway because the Michigan election officials have misinterpreted election law, and they've done so deliberately. This has happened since 2002. The recount in Michigan is supposed to be a forensic investigation. When you file a petition, it actually says, I am filing a petition for recount because of mistake and fraud. So it's a police report. And the law says that you're supposed to have the benefit of a full investigation, not just counting marks on the ballot. So the way they've been running recounts is useless if all you can access are certain ballots and not even all the ballots. So we tried to warn the Stein campaign about this. Unfortunately, they weren't consulting election integrity activists or experts, and they didn't get our warning. So they didn't get their money's worth. Even had the recount finished, it would have been very unproductive, other than showing all the problems that we already knew we had here. Tabulators breaking down, mismanagement, lost and unadded ballots. You know, it was a mess, obviously.
Yeah. But that's the thing, she had the redress under that there were problems. And Michigan, we saw a whole slew of problems, right?
That we already knew we had.
Yeah. So can you tell me the history of the oversight you've provided in the past and what are you trying to get changed?
We had a full legislative reform plan in 2006, and we've been trying to work that plan. Right now, we have two bills that will be introduced in January, and those two bills address the current crisis, that the tabulators are falling apart. They're all 13 and 14 years old, and something has to happen. So we would like to see a blue ribbon commission that takes its time, gets lots of public input, so that we can come up with a much better way to count our votes in the future. That's obviously, and the problem is that our Secretary of State is barreling ahead to do it as a top-down project with no public input, not even what Colorado did with their series of public hearings, lots of public comment. They actually did study and make some decisions. So this is a fight. Who controls the future? And we also have a very detailed proposal. It's now in legislative that would mandate independent, hand-counted, post-election audits of every level in our elections. And that's going to make a big difference even while we're stuck with the old tabulators.
Because this election, it was less than 11,000 vote difference in Michigan, and that's less than 0.2%. So that would have been an automatic recount in Pennsylvania, correct?
Well, other states have a much better automatic cutoffs than we do.
Okay.
In Michigan, it's not a percentage. It's a tiny number, 2,000.
Wow.
Ridiculous. No statewide election election has ever been that close.
And how many people are voters in Michigan?
Well, it depends on who you listen to, but it's about 7 million.
7 million. And it has to be as close as 2,000. I mean, that's crazy that it has to be as close as 2,000 when there's millions of voters. Okay. And also on that, can you tell me, I mean, there's been a lot of stuff. What was going on in Wayne County? Is I believe that the state is actually doing some sort of audit or looking into Wayne County. Can you explain that for us?
Don't get too excited. What our Secretary of State means by an audit has nothing to do with counting votes. They don't seem to think that's relevant. They've been doing procedure audits since 2010, in which they force local clerks to get dragged through about 6 hours of interrogation about whether they posted their required publications on the right date. Did they notify the political parties on the right date of who was assigned to be an election inspector? All of this is important, but it's certainly not an audit of the votes. And we don't have any expectation that they're really going to do an audit the way you and I would think.
Okay. And are you going to plan a citizens audit? And if so, what does that look like?
Mira is still looking at that. We have some ideas. We have done audits in the past. In this case, to do a valid risk-limiting audit of this tiny margin statewide would require us to audit about 660,000 ballots. And that would mean a lot of volunteers and a lot of photography and a lot of hand counting. We've done it on a smaller scale. The biggest one we've done is about 25,000 ballots. And scaling that up was going to be very challenging.
Russ, the director from Hacking Democracy, told me that the Brexit vote was actually 30 million votes counted overnight by hand. Would you love to see that type of, counting done here every time?
In fact, Mira has made a proposal for that. And we think that our elections could be confidently hand counted every election, which is about 4 a year, by about 20,000 trained counters. Those people would be paid about $50 an hour, and we could have our votes counted the next day. And the money would stay in our state. The $65 million that the state wants to spend on new tabulators is only going to last for 10 years. Under our proposal, $65 million would last for 40 years.
Wow, that is huge. It's funny, a lot of people have been asking me, well, what's all the money for the recount for? And actually, one of my friends in Madison was one of the paid recounters. So I said, this is creating short-term jobs before the holidays. So the money is coming from across the country from people who care about democracy, who want to see a valid audit and hand count. And that has been stopped. And it was actually creating, a handful of short-term jobs and showing best practices of how to do a hand count. So I love that you have that solution, long-term. And, I'd love to also get, what were your 3 biggest concerns and what are the solutions that you could address? Both, there's some things are needed in Michigan and some things are needed across, in different states. So if you could talk, you're such an expert on this, if you could talk about what is your experience and across the country and how do you think we can get there?
Well, on the front end of the election, we have massive voter disenfranchisement, whether it's suppression, mismanagement of have the voter data. It's a mess nationally, and we've just got to go to universal voter registration and do what India and Pakistan are doing. They make it possible for people to use their cell phone to update their address and to keep up to date. Why don't we do that here? People move and get lost. We have thousands of young voters. They move about every 2 months. They're moving between relatives' houses, and they lose their right to vote. That's ridiculous. We can't continue this way. So our whole voter registration is out of whack. And I think we should have election day registration. It works. It's very successful in about 18 states. Why not everywhere? It's just a no-brainer. So that's on the front end of the election. During the election, we've got to simplify. Our elections are way too complicated. There are too many errors that you can make. And the introduction of the electronic machines by HAVA, the forced introduction, has created a lot of this complexity. And we don't need that. It's ridiculous. So we should simplify. And it will make it easier to recruit and train the election workers. So that's in the middle of it. And added to that, by the way, is to stretch out the amount of time that people have for voting. Why not have voting for a month everywhere? Not everybody can do that on one day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true in many states because they have early voting or they have absentee voting, which you can do over a period, but it's not universal. Why isn't it? So the more we can make all of these ideas national, the better it will be for voters. When you move from state to state, you don't have to figure out a whole new set of rules. I'm getting such an echo, it's a little hard to talk. But, and then on the back end, of course, is the hand counting and the public nature of that hand counting. Mm-hmm. So that when we're done, everybody has confidence that the count was correct.
Great. And would you like to see a national, like a constitutional amendment for voting rights? Do you think, and would you like to see uniform rules federally, or do you think it needs to be done at the state level?
Well, we've seen what we get from the state level. Yeah, Jimmy Carter won't even observe our elections. They're so chaotic. It's obvious that we've got to have some federal standards. And if we don't, we're not going to correct this. There is a bill under preparation in Congress that will do essentially that. It will ban DREs. It will require a lot of standards for voters' access to voting. And of course, we also need to restore the voting rights.
And do you have that bill number so we can educate people and ask them to call their Congress or senators?
I don't yet have a number because it hasn't been introduced yet.
Oh, okay.
It will be introduced
Great.
in January.
Well, we can add that info. We can add that info later in the YouTube and chat that we're going to have this in.
Great.
So I'd like to keep people posted after the 21st, you know, when this will be added. And then also
this bill, by the way, is not all new stuff. It actually started with two bills that were introduced in 2006 and 2007 by two different people. One was going to create mandatory audits of any electronic vote counting, and the other was Dianne Feinstein's bill that was going to address a lot of the voter suppression and access issues.
Oh, fantastic. So we can reach out and thank Dianne Feinstein for leading on this, and
She did.
we will, we'd like to give credit and encourage the people who are being champions. And I know I'm from Wisconsin originally, and I was happy to see that Rep. Sensenbrenner, after the voting rights was gutted, he actually introduced a bill on voting rights to stop the suppression. So I was surprised, but I was very happy to see that he was leading on that. I mean, it's not my favorite of all the bills, but there's actually, I believe, 5. I have I did a film called Pay to Play, and we talk about the importance of voting in that. And we have 5 of the bills that are before Congress to help with voting rights acts at paytoplay.tv. I think voting rights, but I can share that here too, because I think people need to get educated and start putting pressure on Congress. And then I also wanted to know, how can we support your work? Yeah, how can we support your work?
Well, thank you for asking. We have an immediate need for people to help in our post-recount investigation. So if people are available to help, they can work by email or phone. They should contact me at the Michigan Election Reform Alliance, and you can post my email address and our NERA website if they want to donate to these investigations. We are going to be looking at what happened to the provisional ballots. There's some suspicion that there were way more than there should have been. We want to be looking at what was going on with the 75,000 undervoted ballots that had no vote for president. It was a higher number by double than we've had since records started being kept. That's very suspicious. That's always a hint that something's going on that's not right.
And that's significant because the difference was less than 11,000 votes, and there were 75,000 ballots that the machines say had nobody voted for president, but you will only know that your own with human eyes and with hand. Okay.
The ones that I saw during the recount were piled in a category called other, which included overvotes, undervotes with other candidates marked, and absolutely blank ballots. In absentee count board, who spends a 2-ounce stamp to mail in a blank ballot?
That's crazy. Wow. Yeah, nobody would put in a blank ballot into an envelope and pay to send it in. Wow.
So that's very suspicious. And we saw a lot of those.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Jan. This has been very enlightening. I'm so grateful for all the work you and your team is doing. And I know I will make a donation to your efforts. And I hope that other people can sign up to volunteer and to donate so we can at least change elections from here on out. I mean, would you say that's one of the biggest things about when these recounts happens, that change actually can happen for the next time around?
I'm encouraged by the great number of new people who are becoming activists. We had a lot of trouble getting people to pay attention to this. It was inside baseball. The press wouldn't even pay attention. So now we've got maybe a critical mass.
Yeah, I agree. I've been noticing that the mainstream media only covered voter suppression because of the recount. And then at the same time, they tried to downplay the importance of the recount, not sharing with the public how many problems are happening and how we could have simple statewide solutions to all of these. It's just like, oh, it was done for money or for ego or for whatever, which it's like, you know, all of us who've been working on election integrity for the past 10 years plus know that our system is completely broken, and like the machines in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are outlawed in California because we had a very good Secretary of State who cleaned it up, and we have paper ballots. So there are things that can be done.
One of our girls.
One of your girls?
Deborah, she went to Michigan State University.
Oh, yes, Deborah Bowen. She's the one. She really stood up for election integrity and fixed it. So like, I mean, I went to Norwalk, and we actually, in our primary, we caught them erasing NPP, which are no political party. They were being told to erase the presidential vote in the primary if they were given a Democratic crossover ballot instead of a Democratic ballot instead of a Democratic crossover. And so then they were not honoring the intent of the voters. And luckily we caught it and we stopped them from doing it. But we had 300 volunteers with ballots for burning just for LA County that were going down to Norwalk every day and overseeing the LA County, which we have 5 million voters here just in LA County, which is, more than several states. And what we saw going on, I mean, I was glad we could stop that, but by the time we stopped them, they'd already done it to several thousand, and they went back and fixed that. And that's the computer problem. Like, the voter intent was very clear, and that's why they then saw, what we saw, and they stopped doing that. But all those votes could have been discounted. And that's why I think, hand counting, looking at what is the voter intent is so important. And
another point that I want to raise, and I think people should be very active in their own political parties, is to get the parties to stand up on this. I have not heard from any of the candidates this year any talk about problems with our elections. Not one. Not Bernie, not Hillary, not the Libertarians. Nobody. The parties should be leading the way.
In fact, it was Trump who said that the elections were rigged. But then when we were actually auditing, we saw how he was stopping an accurate audit in Michigan and Pennsylvania.
Right. No, he doesn't really believe that.
Yeah. It's kind of insane. And so I know we're getting close to our running out of time. So I was wondering, is there anything else that you think is really important to share with our audience? I wanted to give people the best information. I know it's overwhelming, and if people want more, we can share things to read and all that. But is there anything else you want to let the audience know?
In every state, there's a group of activists working on election integrity. You can find them, join them, volunteer, because we've all got to be involved.
Yes.
It's not just in some states. And we've got problems in every state. So you can work on this wherever you are.
Okay. Thank you. And again, we'll leave your information so everybody in the audience can get in touch and help. And if not in Michigan, we'll try to give information so they can get involved where they are. And I just really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us and all I know how tireless this work is. So thank you so much. And hopefully we can change it for the future, which is what Empowerment Works is all about.
And thank you for your involvement.
Yeah. Okay. Have a great day. And sorry about the feedback problems. Okay. Bye.